Hey, tolerators, it is Natalie with your pre show announcements. This is your reminder that I have extreme FOMO. And because I have extreme FOMO, I don't want you to be missing out. I even have fear about what you could be missing out on, which is why I wanted to remind you that our Patreon is still running a 7-day free trial on all tiers. Within those tiers, you will get things like ad free episodes, early access to those episodes, bonus check ins with myself and some of our favorite guests, and most importantly, our new comedy series, The Misogyny Meltdown, where I do the unthinkable and combine feminine rage, yelling about everyday misogyny, and late night comedy type sketches and monologues. So, in the show notes, you will find all of the information on how to get to Patreon and claim that 7-day trial. I look forward to seeing you there. And remember, there are free things for you on Patreon as well. So make sure that you are following Patreon so you get sneak peeks into the content that I will be dropping each month and those free blog posts and other resources. Enjoy this episode, and I'll talk to you soon. Hey, tolerators, this is To All the Men I've Tolerated Before with Natalie Katona, your weekly look at everyday misogyny. Today, my guest is Noelle Cope. Noelle is a screenwriter, actress, and poet because we only have the most talented people on the show. She is here to talk about queer representation in media with a specific focus on sapphic relationships. Thank you so much, Noelle, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to dive into this.
I'm so excited. A little behind the scenes, this is literally months in the making, if not almost a year.
No, it's very true. First, there was like endless construction issues, and then there was an entire strike where I was banned from promotions, podcasts, basically any form of viral public speaking, unless it was about the strikes themselves.
What a wild time for media to begin with. And then all I can think about is because of it being a wild time in media, that's why we have movies like Drive-By Dolls and Love Lies Bleeding out currently, because I was like, oh, they gave women a chance because they were like, we need something in the theaters. People have to buy popcorn. I don't know.
No, it's very interesting. I think also from the entertainment side of the industry, it's very interesting to see post-strike and everything where these movies got put, because these movies, I think, are getting a lot more attention than in normal years they would, because right now they're kind of going up against Dune, which is a big blockbuster release, which in a normal year would never get released right now, because it's kind of viewed as January through to like May is dead season. They're like, nobody's buying tickets, nobody wants to go to the movies. If you're lucky, you can push a rom-com for Valentine's Day. But, and occasionally you'll have like a family movie come out at this time because they're like, oh, kids are stuck inside. Disney will drop an animated film. Or sometimes a live action reboot towards the end of April. But it's normally a dead zone. So it's very interesting because I kind of like that what should have been perceived as like, oh, these films about women are just they're getting pushed off to March, February. Instead, it's like, oh, they're the counter programming for Dune. Who's going to what? Like, oh, if you can't get tickets for Dune, are you going to see like which lesbian film? And so it's very interesting to observe how these films, I think, are getting talked about in a lot healthier way than they would have without the strike reshuffling the calendar.
Yeah, a friend and I have been going to like cheap movie night every week because we're like, every week there's a new movie about people of color or women or queer representation. We're like, we have to be at the movies, or I will forget to watch it once it comes on streaming.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think also that's the interesting things we've been seeing since COVID, because COVID really impacted what kind of productions were getting funded, what were getting made, and independent films by nature of being smaller it was harder to fund and like bridge the gap of like covering the COVID medical expenses, because there had to be COVID officers testing all of that. But in a way, it allowed a lot of things to jump back and be made. While bigger productions had a harder time because there's more risk and more people, and like everything got inflated, everything cost more. So movies, I think we're seeing so much more representation that we're actually seeing like kind of draw back in the world of TV and streaming. So I think like it's great to hear from this perspective, like, oh, audience members are really seeing like, oh wait, there's all this diversity at the box office right now. I'm so engaged and I want to go see it at the movies so I don't forget about it, because streaming won't prioritize it the way my local cinema will.
I mean, I can just remember, oh, maybe it was last summer. I was so excited to see The Blackening, and The Blackening was maybe in my movie theater for a week, if not two, because it used to feel like if you weren't right on top setting alarms on your phone about what premiered when, it was gone. And then
Yeah.
you were like, what happened? Like, I didn't get to see Joyride. What
Yeah.
happened?
No, that one came and went so fast. I also tried to see that. And I was like, where'd you go?
What? Huh? And now
Yeah.
she's on Stars. I was like, no one subscribes to Stars. What's
No.
happening?
No, I so feel that. And like that's kind of how, so I'm very lucky in LA. We've got theaters everywhere. But I felt like the nice thing is like people are really loving going to the movies, because I remember the week of like Barbie and Oppenheimer, which was like such an incredible experience. But there was still like other movies playing at my local theater. And I want to go on a date. And we're like, okay, Barbie and Oppenheimer, like, they're sold out. We can't do the back to back thing. Like, okay. So we ended up going to see this movie, like Theater Camp, which is like this quirky little indie film with Ben Platt. It was adorable. We loved it. He's not a theater kid. He's a stunt guy. And he was like, this movie's great. He was laughing the whole time. He's like, I love that. I grew up around musical theater kids. I grew up an actress. I was like, I love this movie. And we were just talking about how fantastic it was that even though there were these two massive movies, this once in a lifetime event, we couldn't get tickets to that, but there were still amazing movies at the theater, and the theater like kept them showing, kept giving us options, and we loved it.
When I showed up to the theater to go see the Eras Tour film, and I realized that there were other people in the theater just trying to enjoy a different movie, I was like, oh, because they really made it seem like the Eras Tour would just take over a movie theater for a couple of weeks.
No, I remember going. I went to see it twice in one day by accident. They had a group of friends that wanted to go, and so we did that. And then my parents wanted to go with me.
Oh, there are two very strong episode topics that are going on kind of concurrently with the podcast right now, and it's where are women's voices being heard, and like, are we welcomed in the communities that we're trying to be heard in? We've been focusing a lot, like, I'm a gamer, I play Dungeons and Dragons, I'm a role player, I'm a board gamer, all of it. And I'm like, oh wow, I scheduled three episodes right in a row about the gaming industry. People are going to be like, we get it, Namely. You love to roll dice, but men don't want you to. And I'm like, yeah, no, it's my entire life. And then this idea of who is making women's stories. I was watching One Day last night, and it's a book that I loved, and it was a movie that I loved. And by the end of it, I went, I actually think I hate this story, because after all of, have you seen it before I spoil it? Everyone
So,
before.
yeah, so I have not seen this new version. I haven't read the book. I, however, growing up, have been a huge Anne Hathaway fan.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw the Anne Hathaway version.
Yeah. So my friend was like, I just get so sad because he put her through so much, and then they were finally happy. And then she gets hit by a car and it's done. And I was like, well, because it was a man writing the book. And he was like, what's the best way to make a man into a good person? Aha, through the emotional baggage and strife and labor of a woman. And then once he's a better person, we just take her away.
Oh, yeah. And what's really fascinating for me about those stories always is it's never about like the tragedy of a woman spends her whole life being mistreated by men. No, they always frame it as this poor man almost had love, but life was so hard. And then, of course, the one time this man gets the woman, she's taken from him. It's very much the like self-centered complex about love. And I think that there's a lot of that in media and the way that they're very, very focused on kind of, again, this whole like pity party for one. And I think a great example of that is Woody Allen.
Oh, yeah.
I kind of think that he's the poster child for, because there'll be like one or two directors that they'll do like one movie like that. And it's like, okay, you're working through your teenage unrequited love angst. You have a very specific abandonment rejection complex. You do this one movie and then you move on and you do like an action blockbuster blowing things up. Woody Allen is one who, like, every one of his movies very much centers on this man is stuck in a relationship, his life is not good, and his life would be better if he was with a woman who's not the woman he's with. But the second he meets his dream girl, it's just not going to work because life is never going to go his way.
And we should feel so, so bad.
We should feel so bad, and we as women should offer ourselves to these men repeatedly and hope that it finally goes better for them, that we'd be doing a service to the world by making ourselves available to these very sad men who could help themselves out through things like therapy.
Right.
Reading a book.
Right. A man would get a woman hit by a car before he ever went to therapy. Like, no. Like,
Yeah.
what? And I think, when we started conceptualizing this episode, it had been maybe a year, if not 2 years, since Happiest Season had come on Hulu, which, made by Hulu, is my new favorite genre of movies because they're wild. Like, they're wild and unpredictable.
No, Hulu is. I'm as someone watching and like part of the industry, right? I love whenever we're like pitching a show, writing something, I audition for something, anything. If Hulu's listed as an option or a part of it, I'm like, let's go for it. Hulu is trying to figure out its identity, and there is nothing more than I love than something that's comparable to teenage angst. If something is going through its equivalency of the teenage phase, I love it. Hulu is a teenager right now. She's going to be going off to college soon. She doesn't know what college she's going to, so she's trying everything. And I love that because it's wild. You have female rage. You've got you've got your like girly pop selection. You've got your dark horror. You've got your weird like Chad Broski things happening.
Yeah, when the weather was at its worst and my like seasonal depression was at its highest, I was just spending weekends just being like, I'm just going to scroll through my saved list on Hulu and I'm just going to watch all of the movies I have saved in order or random. I'll just click a couple of times and be like, this one. And Happiest Season, speaking of teenage angst, I think there's like, there's a kind of teenage angst theme going on in Happiest Season because of the woman who is not out to her parents.
Yes.
So it's very much this idea of you're bringing home someone who is so secure in their sexuality and has been for a while, who I believe at some point a friend is like, but you had the perfect coming out story. You can't fault people who won't. And it's that idea of my life is my life to live right up until it's Christmas time and I have to go home.
No, and I think that that's truly so. Like living in Los Angeles, we have a very beautiful, queer LGBTQ plus community, and it's very active. It's very safe. It's amazing. But I always have to remind myself, and sometimes friends that grew up here, that's like, no, it's not like this. I can go back to maybe the literal hometown of my hometown of Telluride, Colorado, and that would be fine. There's a lot of very progressive people in that hometown. Some of the neighboring towns, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And not even because, necessarily it's like the worst version, there would be harm. There would just be a level of eyes and attention and confusion. And just you wouldn't get the same, level of freedom and anonymity that you get in going about your day in LA. And it's like I think especially for someone like myself who's on the bisexual, pansexual spectrum, I don't personally prescribe to any set label or terminology for my sexuality. But I know that, like, in LA, I can go about and dress one day super, like, femme, where I present perhaps more on the heterosexual side of things. Then other days, I can dress very funky and cute, and people are automatically like, she's queer. That is a woman who loves a woman, or I can dress more androgynous and explore all these things, and it's never going to result in people being unkind or cruel. If anything, I'll just attract different people trying to suss out if they can ask for my number, or wondering if I'm familiar with this community space or event, if that's where they've seen me. And other parts of the country don't have that freedom. And Happiest Season, I felt like, was a movie that, in a very short amount of time, because they had very little time, really set that up well, and set up the way that when you go off and move to a new city, you can be like a full-fledged person that you might not be able to integrate back home.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I just moved from Northwest Indiana to Dayton, Ohio 10 years ago, and I remember feeling that freedom immediately. Even working for the Catholic Church, because I was a Catholic school teacher, there were pockets of safety where it's like, if you're on birth control, just like take your pill at home and like figure it out later. Don't put it on your insurance. And now, as a woman who has a really hard time labeling her sexuality beyond anything than exhausted, I use the word queer. I was like, I think I'm just gonna use the Q, and it makes it easier for everybody. I've already experienced in like low key social situations where I thought that I was safe, like jokes at bisexuality's expense, and I'm like, that's bi erasure, and like you should be a person who doesn't want to fuck around with that. And I think the thing that hits me about Happiest Season is there's a lot of media out there about women who are queer, where it's like the message that I have gathered from media is that if you are a late in life queer woman, then experienced queer women don't want anything to do with you. Like they don't want to like train you, or they think that you're going to go right back to men or whatever. So to be a woman in my 30s trying to just be like, I really only enjoy the company of women, so I should probably date women. Uh, and to be in my 30s and to truly have never experienced that part of my sexuality before, like there's a lot of imposter syndrome and there's a lot of fear, and I can like link it directly to the media I grew up with.
Totally. I mean, I think even for a lot of like my generation, even, the younger half of it, because I'm like at the start of Gen Z. I grew up in a more rural place. I didn't really like understand the rules of the world, because I remember when I was younger, because nobody had told me that like there was prejudice or any of that. So my mom would tell me stories, and she'd refer to her friends as like her girlfriend. She'd be like, "Oh, well, my girlfriend and I would do this." One time I remember being very little, and I asked my mom, I was like, "How many girlfriends did you have before daddy?" It's like, I couldn't keep track of the stories. And being a kid, you want a number, you want to figure it out. And she was like, "Oh, no, 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 I meant girlfriend like my friend. Like, I didn't have any girlfriends before daddy. Like, I didn't have any girlfriends, period." I was like, "Oh."
Oh,
I was like, "Okay." And like, she didn't explain it in a way that was necessarily like women don't date girls. I was just confused. And then I did that thing of like starting to ask other friends. I was like, "Did your mom have girlfriends before your dad?" Like, my mom didn't, but I thought she did. And, so many kids growing up in a more rural place were like, "Women don't kiss girls don't kiss girls," all these things. I was like, oh, because very much up until that point of asking my mom, because of how it was talked about, I had had this very early, like, natural relationship with my sexuality, which has made it very hard for me to put a label on it, right? Because up until that point of asking, because of my misunderstanding of the use of the word, I was like, oh, this is totally normal. Like, you can date girls and you can date boys. And like, I remember as a child already early on trying to figure out, like, did I love Sleeping Beauty because I wanted to be her? Or did I love her because she was hot? And like knowing like, oh, I definitely liked Maleficent because like I like girls. And like being like, I think that's the reason that was my favorite movie, like as a kid. Not necessarily because of the story because like she's asleep. It was like I just had this deep interest in both like attraction to them and also what parts of like these two very polar opposite women were within me. Like it was such an exciting film to watch for so many different like self-discovery purposes.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think it's very interesting like how the media ingrains it in that. And I still have like such imposter syndrome throughout it. And like, you know, there is this like feeling of, you know, trying to remind people like that you are queer, you are this person, it's valid just because it exists, and you don't have to like have hit all these milestones, you don't have to do all these things. But it constantly can feel like you're not hitting it, you're not living up to it, you're not vocal enough in the community, you're not this enough. And even things like the debate over labels, it's like, well, if you're not labeling it, are you truly confident in it? If you're not using labels, are you so progressive that you've already found your rhythm, you exist? Like there's so much discourse with, and it's not even like peer to peer, it's all in the media, it's all in films, it's all in the way that they frame it, it's all the way that these relationships are depicted on screen that I think create and perpetuate the imposter syndrome that we wouldn't have if we interacted with it organically within community.
And then there's also this weird line about like what we're allowed to pick up on as a person who's watching something. Like there's no hiding the fact that there's a lot of discourse surrounding Taylor Swift and her sexuality at all times. And we were at the Eras Drag Brunch downtown, and my friend Jan was like, Betty is such a gay song, right? I go, Betty might be I was like, it might be the gayest song. I go, it might be the reason I'm gay now. Like, I go, it's like the gayest song.
No, I think to this day, the hottest hookup that I had was like at a club to Betty. It was Taylor Swift night, and this girl and I were like, we've been dancing for like a long time. And then all of a sudden, it's Betty. We're like, mm. And then like we get to the bridge, we're singing it to each other, and we start making. I'm like, this. I was like, this is a Taylor Swift like, you know, Wattpad story right here, because it is. It's the gayest song. I don't care if Taylor Swift is or isn't gay, what her identity is. That is a gay song.
It's my gay anthem, and that's my right to say it. Well, and then it's so funny too because there's so much currently Sapphic movies coming out. Now I went and saw Lisa Frankenstein, and I was like, Lisa Frankenstein's a chaotic bisexual, and she just does not know it yet.
Oh yeah, no, like I watched that movie and I was like, she's teenage me. My life would have been so different if this movie had come out when I was 15 or 17. Because oh my god, did I relate to that crazy girl?
Yeah. I was like, I love her. I want to be her.
I know. I was like, personality, like tapped in. She's it.
Yeah. Without questioning herself once, just saying something and being like, that's what I said. Like,
just all in on it. And she, and again, also just her obliviousness to so much of what's going on, and like the way that people are into her, because she's like, she set her mind on the goal, and by God, she's going to get it, even if a much more convenient, equally relevant opportunity arises.
Right. And she's like, no, I have a crush, and that's my entire personality, and that's my right. And I'm like, you're right, Lisa. That is your right.
The layers in that film are so brilliant because it's a comedy in so many ways, but it's dark. It explores trauma. It explores the way we like downplay women's trauma, the way that we then like try to villainize them for it.
Well, and then at the end of it, the credits roll, and I turn to my friend and I'm like, that might have been the most romantic movie I've ever seen.
Right?
It's so romantic. He's like,
no, it's so true. And at the end of the movie, like I went to see it with my cousin, and like we've grown up together. We've seen so many different movies together. We've also seen so many different iterations of each other. We both like the movie stopped and we're like, so we're watching this every year, right? And we're like, yeah. And then we're like, and we both went hot take. I'd watch another one. I'd watch another film of these two doing adventures. Like I want more. I'm so curious to like see where this character goes from here.
oh yeah, because at the end with the swap, I was like, I need that sequel. Like Diablo, I need a sequel. Give me my sequel. Like,
No, like, honestly, and I was so excited going into that film because I've been following Zelda Williams on Twitter for years. I have loved her commentary. I've loved her wit, her opinion, everything. So when I saw that she directed this, I was like, oh, this is the perfect film because I think Diablo Cody is such a brilliant screenwriter, but she's one that I don't think directors have always brought her vision to life or known how to like expand on it and kind of like add their own fingerprint to it in a way that aligns with what Diablo already gave them. And that's like always a challenge with filmmaking. It's a collaborative art form. But the second I saw Zelda, I was like, I have nothing to go off here other than her Twitter feed. But based on her Twitter feed, this film is going to be magical. There's going to be movie magic in this. And it was, I mean, I also grew up as a young girl who's obsessed with like silent movies and like Georges Méliès and his whole story. And so, like, the constant trip to the moon symbolism and all these things, I was like, even just the conversations around how genitalia isn't the most important part of sex
right. Yeah.
go off. It's, 3 lines, but such necessary messaging.
Yes.
Also, again, proof that Lisa Frankenstein is a queer icon.
Oh my gosh. What am I blanking on? And I think about, I haven't seen, but I'm a cheerleader probably in years. And I probably stumbled upon it like because I was a kid with cable who was unsupervised. And so I probably watched but I'm a cheerleader way too young. And if I watched it today, would pick up so much more of it. But to just kind of see like sexuality be played with more in film and just be like, there are more options, including Zendaya playing with 2 white boys. Like, it feels like I've been waiting for challengers for like 5 years because,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
I'm so curious about it. I'm so excited, everything about that. But back to I'm a cheerleader for 1 second. That movie, a friend had recommended it to me during COVID. She was like, I'm losing my mind. And we were in like a pod, so we were able to see each other because we had like the same kind of rules. And so we're like, okay, we're going to go watch, but I'm a cheerleader. We watched it. We were both obsessed. We were like, holy, like, oh my God. And we both walked away with so many thoughts, so many comments. But one of the biggest takeaways for us was we went, I think this is the movie with the best sex scene I've ever seen. And I kind of to this day stand by it. I have yet to see a sex scene that rivals that. And there's so many layers to why. Things from the music to the camera to it feeling like the actresses were the ones making a lot of the calls and the decisions. And it really actually, they didn't need it to serve the plot. It served the characters. And in that, it served the plot. It was so earned. It wasn't manipulative. It was not filmed or done in a way to like be pseudo pornography or to get the audience off. There were just so many layers to it. The actresses' bodies weren't exploited. It was very celebrational. It was very intentional. And so it was just like a very rare scene to see. And also it was really brilliant because how the two girls acted alone in private was also how they acted sexually. And there had been so much little ways of building up what their curiosities were with each other's bodies, and they weren't the same. Which I think a lot of times in, specifically Sapphic or women loving women movies, it's like they're always like obsessed with the same parts of each other's body. And I just think that that's a very confusing message for audience members that are exploring their sexualities. It's like, no, you might not be enamored with your partner's boobs, or you might not be exclusively enamored with your partner's ass. And like, it could just be things like you're obsessed with the way she moves, with, like there's so many different assets. And it's very much like the way, you're not always attracted to the exact same physical features of a male partner. Why would you with a female partner? And like, two partners aren't going to be obsessed with the same parts of each other's body. I mean, they can be. There's no rule saying you can't. But I just love the exploration of that sex scene because you could clearly see the difference of the characters and the characters loving each other and exploring in different ways. I was like, this is so beautiful. It didn't need to be big. It didn't need to be in your face. It didn't need to be scandalous. It was just very real to what those feelings and moments are like when you deeply care about someone. And it was free of like influence from porn, which is very hard to find, especially in sapphic stories.
Because now I'm thinking about drive-by dolls and how my mom and my sister were on board. I went with a friend, but I was telling my sister, and she goes, "Oh, I want to see that so bad." But she has a 1-year old at home. It's impossible to get out to the theater. And then my mom was like, "Let me know how it is because I really want to see it." And then I, the first thing I thought was, should I explain to my mom and my sister how not ready they are to see that amount of graphic, like sapphic sex? Because I feel like this is the first movie I've seen in a while. And I feel like Bros had the same reaction from a lot of people in my area of the country too, where it's like, whenever we see women on women relationships, it's like fuzzy and soft and like caressing and whatnot. And Drive By Dolls was like heavy and fast and hard and like rush. And I was like, oh, that's different. And I go, and people are, and the straights are always ready for different. They're all, because I got a lot of pushback on Bros. People were like, who wants to watch two men do that? I was like, me. I go, I cried when he let Billy Eichner top him because I was like, I know what that means. Like, I know how much of a struggle that was for him to get through and good for him. Like,
No, it's so interesting, and like I found Driveway Dolls to be. I really enjoyed seeing such a genre piece that happened to just be about two women, and it's very much how it felt. I think the only criticism for me was there's a couple of times watching it. I saw it with another friend who's, a lot of her life experience has been in relationships with women, and we both kind of talked about it. We're like, the only thing was there was a couple of scenes where it felt almost like they were struggling to make sure that there was like a who wears the pants type situation. And that's the only thing that I would really love to see us moving away from in the sphere of sapphic love stories. Is it's like, look, because these relationships don't really need to abide by the patriarchy in private, there doesn't need to be a who wears the pants because the hierarchy isn't really there. And again, that might be me projecting all my own personal experience. But in those relationships, for me, it's not like we sit there and it's like, oh my god, who's gonna kill the bug? Well, clearly you, because you're the more masculine of us. It'll be like, who's closer to the spider? Looks like it's me. I'm the assassin today. Boom. Or like other times it'll be like we both scream, freak out, and then it's like, okay, I guess we're just like, what if we do it together? Then we're not like both bad people. And it's like different people bring out different sides of you. But the second the patriarchy doesn't have to be in the relationship, two people can exist equally and things can be negotiated based off personal preference, not who's the man.
right. And I think that's the thing about misogyny, where even if you're not in a relationship with a man, there's still all of those boxes that you're trying to fill or check off, or it truly pigeonholes us into a very gender normative type of thinking. And so it's like, well, yeah, lipstick lesbians only date butch lesbians. And it's like, that's not always true. No.
Oh, and that's the thing is, it's like I think it's a lot of people that just haven't spent actual time in places and met humans. Humans are contradictions of themselves. You can sit there and spend your whole life thinking, this person's my type. No. You meet somebody and they're amazing and they surprise you and it's the best relationship of your life. Or all of these different ways. And it's also so interesting, I feel like, when women who are fortunate enough to have had quite a bit of experience with other women, especially early on before developing really serious relationships with men, kind of like myself, then enter the space of dating men, and it's very confusing for them because you don't necessarily date with misogyny and patriarchy as ingrained. Because you've had to kind of already process, work through that in order to sustain these other relationships. Again, the misogyny and the patriarchy and internalized sexism will never serve you in a sapphic relationship. It's not going to. It's going to undermine you at every turn. And it's going to, it just creates tension and friction that doesn't need to be there because it's outside influences. It's not actually about you and me. And so then you date, heterosexual men, and they're very confused because the rules are different. Because it'll be like, Well, actually, I think like who's going to pay for dinner or whatever is based off of, I don't know, the mood or who makes more money or what we're doing, who made the plans. Like it's a more fluid negotiation because again, when I go out with girls, I'm not expecting her to pay for everything. It's gonna be about who's financially well off, who's not, who wants to do this, or maybe we go on dates where we're not buying anything. That's not a mandatory requisite. And then, but on the flip side, so they'll like love a lot of that. They'll love that I give them, freedom in a bunch of different ways. Flip side, though, that I think a lot of men are very confused by is, well, I expect you to treat me up to a certain standard because a woman's going to. And the biggest one is I like emotional availability and caregiving. It's like, well, I don't need to be in a relationship with someone where I have to settle for their inability to care that I'm sick or, challenge the story and the notion, right? Is always with, straight women is, well, if you get cancer, your husband will cheat on you. If you're chronically ill, your husband will cheat on you. When you're pregnant, that's when your husband's most likely to cheat on you. Those are the times you need to be like most on alert to save your marriage. I don't know, last time I checked, cancer, you're fighting for your life. Chronically ill, you're trying to survive to get better. Children, you're producing an entire human being that I'm pretty sure he also consented to producing. So why are these the points of time when you need to be the most concerned about saving the marriage for him? And so, whereas it's statistically, again, they haven't run as many studies, but statistically, the argument isn't really that that's as common in sapphic relationships. Again, people can experience anything. We're not going to pigeonhole relationships, but the difference in how women approach their partner going through hardship is very different. And so it's like talking to male partners and when like long-term things come up, or, if I get like the flu or like when COVID was a thing, or like one time I got like a freak stomach bug and ended up in the ER. How you treat me in those times has to match what I consider my human baseline, the baseline for any partner. But that means that you're not being held to the standard of guys, which we hold lower. You're being held to the standard of my female and non-binary partners. It's automatically going to be higher. You benefit from the fact that I will not hold you to patriarchal standards. I will not hold you to misogynistic assumptions of men and masculinity. But on the flip side, you have to approach me with a lot more humanity.
And isn't that something? Because the last time that I had the flu, probably not the last time, but the last time I was partnered while having the flu, I just remember texting him like, I can only eat smoothies and I have to keep, like, when you're the flu, you have to keep calories in your body or else, and hydrated. And I was like, it's going to be like $23 to get one smoothie from Tropical Smoothie DoorDash to me. And he's like, yeah, that's expensive, but you got to do what you got to do. Meanwhile, I'm not even talking to one of my like best female friends, not in a, we're in a fight or anything, but like, I'm just not updating her on how my flu's going. And she texted me and she was like, I'm going to get off work late tonight, but I'm going to the grocery store. I will be using my key to your home to stock your house, but I expect you to be in bed. And I'll just say hello to Penelope and you can come down if you want to come down. And if not, me and your cat got this. And I woke up the next day and I had flowers and Sprite and Jello and cans of soup and everything.
No, it is incredible, the intentionality and the show up and the care. And again, I think the person who's always broken it down the best is Bell Hooks. Her trilogy on love is the greatest like social analysis of all of it, breaking it all down and how so much of it is just societal gender roles that we've imposed for no reason. And the concept of women were made to give love and men were made to receive love is a message that we're constantly receiving. And the second you remove men from the equation, you suddenly just have two folks that are giving and receiving. And we experience it so much in female friendship. The gifts and thoughtfulness that friends have put in to my relationship. I was going through a very, very dark time in my life, and I was just really struggling. And I'm someone who feels very close to my family ties, like we mentioned earlier, with Marjorie and Taylor Swift. I'm very close to my maternal grandmother. She's Hungarian, so I'm very close to my Hungarian heritage and what that means. I had a friend text my sister, ask my sister, what region of Hungary do you guys come from? She did all this research to find what flowers were native to our village.
Oh.
She went around Los Angeles collecting the flowers that were native to our village and made me a pillowcase with the flowers pressed into it.
Oh my
So that
God.
whenever I got sad and needed to cry, I could hold the pillowcase, I could frame it, whatever, and I could remember that I came from a long line of women who had been through this and more, and I would get through it just like that.
Oh my God.
It was such a long project to make that. It wasn't my birthday. It wasn't a holiday. It was, I know that you're going through something I can't fix, so I'm going to offer you support. It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced in my life.
And I truly would love for media to catch on to that, the
Yep.
showing up. Because right now we're still in this space where it's like, it's hot and it's sexy and it's new and no one expected it. And it's razzmatazz. And I'm like, I would really, and I understand that I believe I would make a really great reality TV producer, but I also understand that, like, because I just want reality TV to work out and not be toxic, that other people are like, but we watch this because it's toxic. And I'm like, it just bothers me. I don't know.
Again, I feel like you'll love Love is Blind Japan because it's produced very differently.
It's why I love Married at First Sight, because Married at First Sight doesn't pull any punches with how those relationships are actually going. Like, if he's fighting a producer, he's fighting a producer on camera, and we know that she's not in a safe relationship. Where Love is Blind is like, thank God I provided you this fairy tale with a really angry guy you're trapped in a hotel room with. Like,
The amount of angry men in hotel rooms through the course of that show is too high. I'll still never forget the season with Colleen where everyone's like, Colleen, blink twice if you need help.
she's still with him. I think they're showing up to the reunion together, according to her Instagram.
It was interesting because, again, I still remember the blink twice if you need help Colleen memes, which felt very real. Like, I felt like the memes they were seeing what we were all seeing. So that'll be interesting for sure.
But I would love for media to get to a place, and there was a movie, and I think it's called The Kids Are All Right. And it was about a family that was being raised by two mothers. And it was just kind of it was a normal movie. It was a normal family movie that just also happened to feature two moms. And The Fosters does a lot of that too. And then Good Trouble that just ended, so I had to sob. It gets back to the sexy and the flashy because they're all young and they're all experimenting. But I would love for us to get to the point where when men go, well, why would you want to date a woman when you've dated men your entire life? You could just like click on a TV show and be like, do you see how they're showing up for one another mentally, emotionally, and physically? Do you
Yeah.
see it?
Well, I would also love to see more shows, even for heterosexual women. Because, again, I always feel so bad. I have so many heterosexual friends that, they'll see me talking to women, dating women. They'll see me with folks that are non-binary, right? And they'll still, see or witness a different level of show up, where there have been certain men, even if the relationships haven't worked out for various reasons, throughout points in the relationship, because of the new standard that I'm holding and meeting them with, start to reciprocate differently. And they're always like, God, I wish I was attracted to women. I wish that was my truth. All these things, because it's such a different level. And I wish that, heterosexual women had more movies and shows to go off of than the constant daddy problems.
Oh, yeah.
Because we always see how, having a bad father image impacts women's relationships. What about a good dad that just, really loves his wife? What about, I want more of, Adam's family, right? Where is Gomez Adams and his
Right.
love of Morticia? I want to see the little girl that grows up with that and goes into dating going, with, and not the whole she's a spoiled little brat. Who goes, my daddy does this. Who's just like, you know, my dad always did this with my mom. My dad always respected my mom's dreams. And she respects herself and her dreams and has, different standards. So, no, I'd love to see media expand and have room for embracing and showing quaint stories and including the sweet moments and all that. And like you can have the flashy, good trouble, gossip girl things, but like can we also cut to like the one girl that goes home and her dad loves her mom?
Honestly, because no, we were seriously for our spin-off show for subscribers, the Misogyny Meltdown, where I'm doing more of a like late night sketch show feel. We were playing this game I created called Feminist Icon question mark, where I was quizzing a man on different feminist icons, and one was Morticia Adams, and he gave a beautiful reason as to why Morticia Adams is a feminist icon. And I was like, that was all really beautiful, but you're wrong. And he's like, why am I wrong? I go, Morticia Adams is a feminist icon because she's one of the only examples that young women get that their husbands should like them, because every sitcom would tell you otherwise.
No, it's true. And it's like I grew up with, a lot of the sitcom jokes and everything of if you want to know how to have a good husband, the best thing to do is buy a How to Train a Dog book. And it's like, okay, that's fine. Or like I also then very early, in the entering the dating scene, which for me was my late teens more. Like I mean, I messed around, but I wasn't like actually like intentionally dating. It was more like, oh my god, you're cute, I'm cute, let's be cute together type dating. But I remember it's like everybody started to like actually like get like serious boyfriends. People weren't just like stuck on set all the time and just like dating whoever was in their acting class, right? The book that was going around was Why Men Love Bitches.
Oh.
And that was very interesting because it was very much like how to program yourself to like do things. And there's some like I can see some progressive like thoughts throughout the books, but I was like, this is still a lot of the I have to like play games mentality to get a man. And that just always, again, being someone who was always like, bouncing and fluctuating between genders and everything, was like, why would I have to play a game with a man when I could just be me with a woman? Shouldn't I just be me and see who stays and who I like for how they like how we spend our time and how they make me feel?
Right, because you grew up in the era of Why Men Love Bitches, and I grew up in the era where men were passing around that book, The Game, and winning the game. And I was like, I don't want to be the piece, like I don't want to be your pass go on Monopoly. Like I don't want to be your free parking space. Thank you. And it's just I'm at the point where I'm ready to like, and I'm not even saying that like we should not have drama anymore in our reality TV or our scripted television, but I'm like, I would just like to see some sort of example of people doing it okay, of this whole romance thing and like modernized romance where, partners are on equal footing with one another. What does it look like if your wife is making more money than you, but you're having children and no one wants to pay for daycare? So does that mean we're going back to daddy daycare? Like, what does that look like?
I think, yeah, again, and things of like, it's okay also in a relationship if equality looks a little bit different than just 50% for you, 50% for me, because again, relationships and people go in flux. A relationship with a partner who may not be as physically able is not going to be like, oh, we're equal with what we physically do. No, you have to accommodate. And I think, again, there's like this expectation of like, well, every man or woman does this. No, no, no. We have to take it case by case, and couples have to figure out what is equal for them based off of this. Now, certain things like emotional vulnerability, being emotionally available, respect, all of those things need to be equal. But I'm very tired of the kind of like all acts of service need to be created equal mentality when it's like, no, it can be about intentionality. It can be about expression of love. It can be, I would like things with a lot more nuance. I think that's the thing that we're really struggling with is that society's always struggled with nuance. And we're having a very, very hard time with it in media right now because there's very much this narrative going around that our attention spans are so short, that TikTok has corrupted our attention spans. And it's like, I would argue with someone in the entertainment industry that there is some truth to that, and there's also some lies. We do enjoy things that are fast-paced and glitzy. We need something to grab our attention because we have very little time, and because we have a lot of things that we want to do in the time that we have.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that once we sit down with something and it has our attention, that it needs to stay fast. It needs to stay over the top. It needs to be like melodrama and heightened and bad examples everywhere. So it's like, can we bring some nuance back to the conversation? Can we have some examples of people making really simple mistakes? Can we show what personalized quality looks like?
How do you feel about reality TV entering this new era about queer representation? Because The Bachelor is like pretending like they're going to do it. And I'm like, okay, ABC. But we had, Queer Love Ultimatum, and they called it Ultimatum Queer Love. And I was like, okay, Netflix. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, unscripted, there's always going to be a lot of the kind of clickbait, presentation to it. I think I very much enjoy the inclusion of queer representation. I think right now it's still in its infancy for a lot of these things, specifically the dating show aspect, because there's very much been this narrative of like, The Bachelor falls apart if it's all women who love women going after the Bachelorette because they might realize that they actually like each other and then don't want to fight for her. And that was kind of validated for many people with the whole Paradise spinoff, and there was the season where the two women kind of fell for each other. I personally think that with something like The Bachelor, it's kind of on the fault of the Bachelorette and the producers. And I'm not saying that the Bachelorette needs to be super manipulative, but it's like, okay, then cut the pool down of people. Don't necessarily have all the girls have to spend time together. Like, just change the format a little. It's like, okay, they can all live in an apartment building. They can have friends. They can, like, the Bachelorette dates in a way that's more kind of like rotational dating that we see in the real world than the kind of Bachelorette formula right now, where they all go on the group trips and the group dates. It's like, no, and let's actually see the Bachelorette or the Bachelor have to actually be appealing and interesting and treat these people well in order for them to stay. Because there's been a lot of the times on the show, and I've predominantly watched it when it's been like The Bachelor, so it's women, kind of competing for the attention. Is I've been like, he can't remember you, he doesn't care about you, and yet you're crying to the camera about feeling rejected and hurt, which I understand why you do feel rejected and hurt. And, you're on that show because dating has been hard, because you're looking for commitment and all these things. I very much sympathize with the, quote unquote contestants. But I'm like, but why him?
yeah.
There has to be someone who actually cares about you and isn't just giving you a rose because it's not like he can kick two people off this week. It just perpetuates such a storyline of like, women should settle for the guy that's available.
Oh yeah, he was an arm's length away from me rule. Like, well, why him? Because he was there. Like, he was just like right there. I might turn this into a TikTok series because my friend keeps tagging me into Facebook conversations that we had publicly on each other's statuses. And I was doing one of those like Facebook quizzes, and it was like, who are you going to marry? And I was like, the first man who would ask. And she tagged me and she's like, Natalie, I need you to revisit 35. And I was like, stop making me relive times that I was bad for my own brand. Like, but it is like, why do you want to be in love with the Bachelor? Because he's the Bachelor and I need to win. Or, I want to go to Spain. And if I get to the last 5, I get to go to Spain.
No, literally. And honestly, I feel like I would understand the girls that are there. They're like, I'm here for Spain. I'm here for the passport stamp. I'd be like, yeah, girl. I see you. But like, because it's almost like you almost want to scream at them like, I think you're amazing, have standards. And I think that's been like the very interesting thing. I didn't watch her seasons, but the contestant from, I think it was like it was kind of like the 2021, and then she did like the 2022 is the double Bachelorette season. Gabby something.
Yeah.
It didn't luck out. Was just struggling. Left the show. Met an amazing female comedian here in LA. They moved in together after 3 months. She's like, turns out I like girls. And she's like, this is my first relationship with a woman. And I think it's the best. And I love her social media and the way she talks about how it's been different for her and discovering for her that she doesn't just exclusively like men, that she's in love with her partner, Robbie, and the way that they do all of it. And also, I've really loved how she's been sharing with her followers the subtle differences of the relationship and why it's so healthy and why it feels so good for her. Because we watched 2 seasons of her get mistreated by men. And again, it's not to necessarily say all men mistreat, but we're talking about queerness. And what happens when suddenly you don't have the patriarchy, you don't have misogyny, you don't have these gender roles that in many ways encourage male partners to not show up for female partners. You know, that very much encourage the bare minimum as the gold standard. To suddenly take that all away and have this woman sharing what it's like for her when all that's removed and how happy she is and fulfilled in her relationship. And she gets to, in so many ways, share the goofier sides of herself and have those supported, while then also being able to really dive deep into all of the things that matter. Like, she was an ER nurse. Like, she's no dummy. But she just likes to be fun and have a fun side to her and humor that wasn't really supported with the men in her world and in her dating life.
Well, and it's also not supported by ABC. We have a whole conversation on our bonus content for the Misogyny Meltdown with reality TV producer Chris DeRosa, where it's like, The Bachelor doesn't know what to do with women with personalities. And it sure doesn't know what to do with assertive women who are like, no, this is me. And it turns out I'm fantastic. Like, I will not play this game like, I hope he likes me. And I hope I get the one-on-one. Like, no, you should like me. Like, all of a sudden, me saying he should like me, I'm fantastic, makes me the villain of the season.
No, it's so interesting, and I think that that's very, again, exemplary of the real world. Like, I've had a lot of very interesting experiences dating, and dating in LA is very interesting because we have kind of like one overarching industry, which is the entertainment industry. And if you work in anything related to entertainment, the question is always going to be, do you or don't you like dating people that work within that world? They can even be like entertainment attorneys. How do you feel about it? And what point are they more entertainment? And what point are they more attorney? And all of that. And it's been very interesting for me because I think I've personally always been someone who, despite some negative experiences, have enjoyed dating people that work within my industry. And one of the reasons has, for me, always been, if there's someone who's even open to their own creativity, they're not going to be dating me in hopes of taking mine on. And I've had a lot of negative experiences, even within first dates with guys, where it's like, I think what's happening here is because you aren't creatively fulfilled. You aren't pursuing anything related to your own creative expression. You're kind of manic pixie dream girling me, hoping that I'll bring that out in you. But what you don't understand is I'm going to be too big for you.
Right.
I'm going to always be too much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an actor's actor. I hang out with the loudest people at the party. I hang out with the people with the biggest opinions because I want to be around people that are confident enough in those elements of themselves that I'm not going to be intimidating or the problem. Because I like the freedom to explore those parts of myself. And very similar again with, representation in film and media. That's one thing that I would love to see being shared more when we show like Sapphic relationships. Is so often for us, those are relationships where we get to be goofy, we get to be silly, we get to be laughing till we're in tears over something absolutely ridiculous. But then the second things get serious, we immediately match that level. I'm like, okay, this is serious. I'm not going to goof around. I've got you. Stepping up to the plate there. And it's like, I think that was something that Happy This Season really tried to address and balance. Was it's like when the two women were alone together, they had so many levels. They explored and they went between. And you don't always see that even with rom-coms with the heterosexual partners because the man always has to maintain power. He always has to come out on top. We have to know, unless he's the super goofy guy and he's just like a little golden retriever boy, in which case he's always going to be down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why do we do that? Why can't we explore that? And then alternatively, we can try to force that dynamic and image onto queer relationships. And it's like, that's not going to ever feel authentic to those of us who have been in it because we don't have the same power struggle. There can be a power struggle, don't get me wrong, like age, finances, education, cultural influences. Interracial is still very much a thing, and that can play out in very specific ways with same-sex partnerships, all of that. But there isn't this inherent need to always be the one on top. Like, even if we're talking about topping and bottoming, that stays, in specific scenarios. It's not every conversation.
It's not, well, whose turn is it to pay for the DoorDash today? Like, because I think that when I have to be like the liberal in the room leading the older adults into what it means to be queer or trans or anything, I'm like, hey, look at me. It's not that different. You can just continue to talk like people are people. Like, it's not, you don't actually need to ask them like, well, which one of you is like the man in the relationship? Like, which one?
Plot twist. No.
No one. If we wanted a man in the relationship, we would have gone on couple to throuple, and we didn't. So
No, literally, it's like, that's the very funny thing is it's like, surprise. It doesn't have to be the exact same. It doesn't have to be that different, but it also doesn't have to be the same as you. And also, I love I know a lesbian couple, and I'll be like, oh god, where are they going with this? And I'll be like, they're an interesting couple because they only like cats. Well, man, my girl, she volunteers at a dog shelter, so I don't think that's applicable to us. But I'm happy that you found the cat lady lesbians. They're icons. We love that. But again, that weird like one thing that about this one couple that comes into your cafe, not necessarily going to apply to all of us.
right, I'm the dumbass who loves cats and dogs.
I think that's how it should be. I'm over the, like, again, maybe it's the bisexual in me. I'm over the discourse of love a cat, love a dog, like pick one. Can I love both? Like, am I preferentially biased towards cats? Yes, I think that's because internally I have black cat energy. That's just me. That's how I function. But like, I love both. Like,
Yeah.
what? People make up rules for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as a society, we just need to move away from that.
Right. Just making up rules for no reason is how we got misogyny, homophobia, and racism.
Yeah.
Honestly.
There we go.
And capitalism. Because
Dude,
why do I care so much about these numbers in my phone that hold no meaning to me?
no, literally, why do we care about, and also it's like, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to care so much about this that I stop living the one life that I have.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I'm like, why is Meyer throwing away chicken when we could just be giving people chicken?
No, well, I mean, that's the thing that my mom actually volunteers with an organization that collects food that's not sold, that would just get thrown away to drive it around. And I've learned from watching that so much about the food industry and how we destroy produce and what we let expire. And just the rules about feeding people and really addressing the fact that we have the means to course correct so much of this. We just don't have infrastructure. We just don't have the infrastructure for it. Because
they don't want to course correct it, because the moment that people realize that they can be fed without being a cog in the capitalist machine, then Jeff Bezos doesn't make an extra $1 billion a year. Well, let's go ahead and move to our last part of the episode, where you can express a lesson that you've learned by doing a deep dive on how Sapphic relationships are presented in media, and then we'll offer up some manifestations to better media for all of us. Wouldn't that be something? But if you had to sum up your work and your work in looking at media and the critical eye that you take in media and sum it up into a, if you must know one thing, know that this is happening or know that you should be doing this. What's a lesson you would pass on to people?
Oh, well, I think it's hard because I approach it too. Like, there's different for audience members and different for filmmakers. So I'd like to address the filmmakers first that might be listening, or storytellers in general. It's remembering that how two women talk in private might not necessarily be how two women talk in public, and to for yourself explore why and what those conversations may be like. Because I'm not going to sit here and say no male director or writer can tell a sapphic love story. You might be doing an ensemble piece, you might be in the writer's room on a TV show that has multiple characters. But I think the most flawed thing is how women talk to women in private spaces, especially sapphic characters. And I'd love to see a more authentic, more enlightened, more nuanced version of that explored. And if you're a man who hasn't had the privilege of sitting and witnessing two women talking alone in a room, maybe it's time to start facilitating that, expanding your female friendships so that you're included in those spaces. With permission and consent between two people. I'm not saying date queer spaces. I'm saying have female friends that respect, that will have honest conversations with you. And then for audience members, I think I would love to say, remember that there is no singular experience or representation. You don't need to take it on you or feel imposter syndrome if the movie that everybody says is the best queer movie, the best sapphic movie, the best women-loving women movie ever, if it doesn't strike a chord with you. That does not make your identity any less. It just means you have a different experience, and there's another film or book or song or something out there that will be true to yours. And if there isn't, and one doesn't come along, maybe it's because it's your job to share it with the other people like you. There's no singular identity.
And I think I'll just take a moment to go, the whole Nicole Kidman gave us a beautiful speech at the beginning of every AMC movie in the movie theaters, where she tells us that we're supposed to be going to the movies to experience things and learn about ourselves. And that can't be done if we're only telling white straight people stories.
Yep.
So I would urge audience members to go see American fiction, even if you're embarrassed by every joke in American fiction, because it does take the piss out of white people, but I loved every joke.
No, I love that. I could do a whole episode just about that movie. It's
honestly
brilliant.
I think I've learned the most coming into my 30s and coming into my own person is I won't know anything without experiencing anything. So if you're a straight white dude, watch movies that are about queer teenage women. Because what if one day you're raising a queer teenage woman? Like,
oh yeah,
there's so much of that, like, well, I've never experienced that, so I wouldn't know. And it's like, okay, then read a book. I don't know. Like, see a movie.
do all those things. It's also the funny thing is I think so many of the people that are detached from these things are people that have a niece, have a girl in their apartment building, and I'm not saying to seek them out. I'm just saying, yeah, when you see her, actually ask her about her day and listen to the response. There the people in your life that have these things, listen to the response.
What is something that you would manifest for the future of media, women, sapphic relationships, anything your heart's pulling at today?
Honestly, I think it's just more. Give me more. I am such a fan of watching people just create and do it. I love imperfect things if they're made intentionally. I think I want to see more and more creatives move away from imposter syndrome. I want to see more creatives have the numbers and statistics to back it all up so that people can really say, these are successful, these are it, because we want more and we all benefit from exploring more and having these conversations. And listeners will go away from this podcast and they'll be having these conversations with people around them. Just give me more. More authentic.
More was mine too. So I'll just sign off on that. I don't have any other smart things except for I'm greedy and I want more women in movies. Like I want every day to feel like Barbieheimer, where it's like the Barbie movie beat out Oppenheimer in the box office and I got to brag about that for months. Like I want I want every day to be the "What do you mean the Eras Tour is making that much in the box office? Didn't you all go to the concert?" I want every day to start to feel like
I want more characters like, again, different people have their interpretation. I'm open to being corrected. I found it so refreshing that in the holdovers, a character that would have served no plot point, nothing, she got a scene alone with her sister to talk not once about Paul Giamatti. Instead, she just talked about her son and her life and her experience and her little nephew who was on the way. That is a moment in a story that I was so happy because I was like, wow, normally this character would fall so hard into a mammy stereotype and all these things, and instead there is a very interesting attempt to be made to make her a person who is not just here for Paul Giamatti's storyline. And I'd love to see people taking more risks like that, and in turn giving actors the opportunity to do their job really well. I think she's probably going to win Best Supporting, and I'm so excited because she killed it in the holdovers.
yeah. And most importantly, I would like it that Lily Gladstone never had to look at Leonardo DiCaprio again. Like, I hope that this is the end of her having to tolerate Leonardo DiCaprio. Like,
Dude, I could do a whole episode on that. I agree. I'm manifesting that for her very hard.
yeah, Lily, I didn't see your movie because I can't listen to Leonardo talk for 3 hours anymore. But every day I think about you and I think about how you had to be romantically inclined towards Leonardo DiCaprio as he colonized your movie and your village and all of it. Like,
No, I think that's a very hard thing. Is my one side of my family is Native American from Oklahoma, Chickasaw. All that, it is very hard. I think for me a lot of times. I'm tired of white people telling native stories. You can't, as the colonizer, do these stories justice. And you can't make the story about how hard it is for the colonizer to pillage and take over and still be married to your wife, whose people you're killing. I'm much more interested in what it's like to be the wife who's stuck and doesn't know what to do.
I have a book recommendation once we wrap this up. Thank you so much, Noelle. I'm so glad that this finally happened.
Me too. I love this.
I love this. You're invited back every time, anytime. The secret rule of To All the Men I've Tolerated Before is once the episode wraps, you're my friend forever. I gotcha. Like,
I love it. I love it.
please make sure that everyone knows where to get your collection of poetry that's being published and everything and find your work.
Yeah, so in very true to this nature of this podcast and very true to Taylor Swift, instead of releasing an album to process my feelings, I released a collection of poetry. And I'm very proud of it. And it's very different from my work in entertainment because it's very personal. I journal, and I journal in poetry form primarily. And so I released a collection of poetry that recounts my own personal 3-year experience with intimate partner abuse, which is a form of sexual and emotional assault I think society has a very tough time knowing how to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a book of poetry very much written with the poems curated and selected so that survivors can read it with minimal amounts of re-triggering and re-traumatization, but also to help their support system understand what the internal and emotional world of living with things like CPTSD feel like. It's 100% real. It's all the poems that I wrote before, during, and after. And it is available at all major booksellers' websites in the US. There are independent bookstores across the country that are currently carrying it, so call your neighborhood shop. And then if you are in the UK, it's available on Amazon and Blackwell. Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, it's available on Amazon and a couple of other book sites because it's expanding based off of feedback and sales. And you can find me on Instagram with my handle is @Noelle Pope, and all of the info and links and everything is there. I'm across all their social media platforms with @Noelle Hope, and I love to answer any questions anyone has about media, entertainment, or poetry.
Yeah. And tolerators, don't worry, all of that is going to be in the show notes because we love buying books. We love
Yay!
poetry. I also journal through poetry every once in a while, and we can talk about that offline because people are like, we get it, Natalie, you do everything. But remember, tolerators, you can find us on Instagram at Men I've Tolerated Pod. You're gonna also want to click on the link tree and the Patreon link in the show notes. So you are following Patreon on free for free because that's where I'm keeping our blog. And that's the only place you get the misogyny meltdown where I decide if they're not going to give me or Taylor Tomlinson a late night show, then I'll just create a late night show for myself. Like, because why wouldn't I? So make sure you're checking out all of the trailers for the misogyny meltdown and helping get that across. And remember, tolerators, you don't have to smile through anything you're tolerating, including watching a movie, tilting your head, and going, what happened to they didn't even think to include queer women in the movie about this part of the timeline. Okay. Smiles are for joy.